Hi, I'm Malcolm Haslett.
And I'm Janice Baker. What happens to the props, costumes, posters and handbills from different theatrical productions?
You chuck them in the bin?
No.
No? Well, we'll find out what does happen to them next on Our Time. Do you know something I've just realised?
What's that?
This is my 300th show of Our Time.
Yours?
Mine, and it's got to be your 309th.
Yes.
Or 8th.
9th, I think.
And they said it wouldn't last for more than 7 years. What were they thinking? Good heavens. That should be in the Performing Arts collection.
It should.
Because that's who we're talking about, a lady who's been, or talking to, a lady who's been associated with that collection for quite some time, but has a fascinating story to tell as we welcome Jo Peoples.
Thank you, Malcolm. Hi, Janice.
Hello.
It's lovely to eventually have got you here with us in the studio, because you are the busiest lady, even though you've retired. Because you have, haven't you?
Well, everyone who's retired's busy.
Yes.
Haven't you noticed? Haven't you noticed?
Isn't it?
I think you're a bit slower doing things, really.
Don't tell me about
And it
that.
seems busy.
But always find something to do. don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Jo, you have been the curator, I'm trying hard, curator of the, just say it for me, please.
The curator of the Performing Arts Collection.
You did it so well.
Since 1979.
But let's talk about how you got interested in the arts in the first place, because you're also a bass player.
Yes.
A lovely little thing like you slapping the bass.
I love it. I love it.
I know.
Still playing it. I think I'm the oldest lady bass player in the world, probably.
But why didn't you take up a simple instrument, same shape like a violin, so easy to carry to work?
No.
Piccolo's
Often I
even.
wished I'd taken up the flute or something simple like that, you know.
So much
But
power.
originally I played the piano for 10 years. I studied piano for 10 years.
Well, they both got
and I
strings.
came to the bass rather late in life, like at 34. I decided I'd take it up. So, you know.
Wow. I love that.
I've had a fantastic... Look, I've earned some money. I did some professional work. When I first started, I was learning from a guy called Peter Cassidy, who...
I know Peter well.
You remember Peter?
Yes,
He used to play with the ASO. He was gorgeous.
Yep.
And I'd only been playing about, 2 or 3 years. And he said, I'm in charge of recruiting the basses for the backup orchestra for George Benson.
Ooh.
He's playing at the Adelaide Oval and they want 3 bass players. Do you want to come? And I said, yes, I'll be in that. So we had one rehearsal, and on the day he said, we've only got 2 bass players, so it's just you and me. I said, okay, fine. Anyway, we had one rehearsal in the dining room of the Adelaide Oval there, and the music had been all over Australia. It had red and blue and green pencils. You barely see the note. Somehow we got through it. And then we had to come back in the evening, and the promoter was a guy called Gary Van Egmont.
Yes.
You know that name well.
Yes.
And the tour manager was walking around with this big checkbook before the show, writing checks for everyone. I thought, I don't even have to play. I could go home now. Anyway, we took the checks, we did the show, and, you know, it was fantastic. All I saw was the back of George Benson, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, about a week later, Peter phoned me and he said, have you put your cheque in the bank? And I said, yes. And he said, mine's bounced.
Ooh.
I said, mine hasn't, very smugly. Anyway, of course, the next day it bounced.
Oh, no.
It turned out that Gary Van Egmont, we were the last leg of the tour in Adelaide, and he'd gone broke.
No.
Yes. And so for the next year, I kept getting these letters saying how much money Gary Van Egmont owed, like he owed, you know, $300,000 to Ansett and some transport company, $500,000, and all these people, Jo Peoples, $120.
Oh, no.
But after 12 months, I got $90. So I got 2/3.
Oh, goodness.
It's always hard when those tours go astray, so to speak, financially.
Well,
But look, let's go back to the beginning, because you're a Broken Hill girl, aren't you?
Yes, born and bred. My grandfather came to Broken Hill as a pharmacist back at the late 19th century, 1895. I think it started People's Pharmacy there. And then my father became a chemist, and also my brother. So I grew up in Broken Hill. My father was always keen on the arts. And in fact, I think it was 1944, he and 3 other men up there started the Broken Hill Repertory Society, which is still going today. And they used to do, some fantastic shows. And they had these wonderful directors coming there. They had one director who had worked with Charles Cheval, the early filmmaker.
Yes.
And they did a production up there of The Chocolate Soldier. And representatives from J.C. Williamson came up and looked at it, and they wanted to take it on tour. But of course, the people that were in it were in essential occupations because it was during the war.
It was community theatre too,
Yes,
I guess, wasn't it?
yes.
So they couldn't just
pick up and go. So Dad was keen on that, but of course once the kids came along, he didn't have time to be doing that, but he always loved theatre. And then when I was about, I think it was about 8 or 10, my parents took us to see a production of Salad Days at the Old Crystal Theatre.
I've done
And I just thought I was entranced. I just thought it was fabulous. And ever since then, I just loved it. So then I did work with the Broken Hill Repertory for about 8 years. And then when I came down here,
Down here being Adelaide.
Yes, down to Adelaide. Got into theatre here with Jim Verley and the University Theatre Guild and sort of trained with him for 4 years.
So did you see yourself becoming an actor? Is that what you thought you would be?
Look, I was absolutely desperate to go to NIDA. That's what I wanted to do, but my father sort of said no. He didn't sort of see that as a good idea. A
lot of people don't realise that acting is a real profession.
Well, that's right.
Not all doctors and dentists become famous doctors and dentists.
Exactly.
Some just do their job quietly in the background.
But actually, in retrospect, I think Dad was right, because it's a really hard life being an actor. And, most actors earn, they're lucky if they earn $10,000 a year.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
And much money.
They're not in it for the money, really.
No, some very clever people, very clever actors have said, both to us here on the program and, personally working in the industry, if you don't need to be an actor as badly as you need to breathe, then don't.
Yeah, and just do it as a hobby.
Well, it's a hard life, it's true, and yes, you can do it as a hobby.
Exactly.
But you probably you won't reach the dizzying heights of so-called name up in lights,
Yeah.
But you look at people who are like that, and certainly with the Performing Arts Collection, we'll talk about that in a tick, but you must have stories and props and stuff of people who've literally given their life to the industry, because that's what happens.
Absolutely.
It's an all-encompassing
And I was
thing.
so lucky that I had that background in music and theatre when I got into the job with the Performing Arts Collection, and it was fabulous, the best job that I had for 35 years. How lucky was I?
So there's a bit of a story as to how this happened, which is a weird one in itself.
Oh, I know. Look, it had never happened today, but I was working as it was a motel on, was a Portrush Road, and I was in the dining room, swanning around, being a
Looking
supervisor.
elegant. Oh, okay.
Being a supervisor. And I used to go to workshops with Jim Verley for the Theatre Guild every Monday night. And because I was doing some night shifts sometimes, I couldn't do the workshops. And Jim said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll find you a job so you can come back and do some acting." Anyway, one night I got to the workshop and Jim said, "Oh, I think we found it. Have you heard about Tom Dermody's new job? He's got this job as the project officer, setting up this Performing Arts Collection with Colin Ballantyne, who at that stage was the chairman of the State Theatre Company and had been a big mover and shaker in theatre for 50 years.
Well, it all sort of came out of the John Dunstan era here in South Australia, didn't it?
Exactly. So he said, and Tom needs a secretary, and we think you'd be perfect. Go round and see him. So I left the workshop, raced around to Tom's, and he said, yeah, I've got this fabulous job. Do you want to be the secretary? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I'll give your name to Josie Dowling, who was the business manager at the State Theatre Company. 2 weeks later, I had the job.
And so you more or less put your acting career on hold to do something that you didn't have a background in, only a passion for. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, listen, hold that thought. We'll be back in a moment just to discuss what that job actually was and how important it is to the whole of Australia. We're talking with Jo Peoples, and we're about to talk about the Performing Arts Collection, which has grown enormously since Jo began working as a secretary and then became the curator. Look, I said it perfectly that time.
Yes. So I started off as the secretary, and we started off in a building in Kent Town, and we had 2 rooms. And Colin used to go around to all the actors, you know, with the State Theatre Company, like Dennis Olsen, Teddy Hodgman, and get their memorabilia, you know, their boxes of programs and things like that, and bring them over, and we had a catalogue card specially designed, and I used to sit there. And Colin, you know, it was fantastic because Colin used to come in every day at 9 o'clock till about 12 o'clock. And at 12 o'clock, he'd ring up and he'd say, Gwyneth, it's Colin, I'm on my way, bang, and he'd slam the phone down and off he'd go
Leaving
home.
you.
Yeah, that's right. But in that 3 hours, he told me all these wonderful stories because we'd go through the programs and he'd say, oh, that actress, I remember her, and he'd tell me these wonderful stories, you know. And at first it annoyed me. I thought, I'll never get any work done. But then I thought, no, just listen, this guy's got a history.
Yeah.
He tells these fantastic stories. Just listen to it. Anyway, so that's what we did. Well, after 18 months, Tom decided he wanted to go bike riding in Nepal.
Of course you do.
He was into fitness then. So he went off, and then I got the job as the project officer, and then that developed into curator, and then I had various other people coming and working for me. And then we were in that building for about 18 months, and we gradually outgrew these 2 rooms. And one day in my lunch hour, I was walking along Beulah Road, and there was this church hall. I said to Colin, that might be really good, the church hall. So Colin went and had a look, and we just decided we'd rent it from, belonged to the Anglican Church, I think. There's just next to that Greek church in Beulah Road. Anyway, they had this hall at the back. And so did you ever go there, that hall?
No. Only
Well,
the Festival Theatre
we
one.
fitted out the body of the hall as an exhibition area, and we had these blue neon hoops put in. They looked fantastic. And so we used to do exhibitions and things there. And at that stage, for the first 5 years or 6 years, we were under the auspices of the State Theatre Company. And then in 1985, so it must have been 6 years we were under State Theatre Company, Colin negotiated with the Adelaide Festival Centre, and we moved into the Adelaide Festival Centre, and we became part of.
And you were sort of underground
Festival
then, weren't
Centre.
you? You were in the bowels of the earth.
Yes, we were
so
over
to speak.
there under the car park.
Well, it makes more sense to have been part of the theatre
Well,
with what you were
yes.
doing
Well,
than being
exactly.
somewhere else.
And that's where so many
Exactly.
of the displays in the theatre came from, because you had that collection.
That's right.
Jo, I think the interesting thing that the general public may not realise is that it is accessible to them, isn't it? from time to
Yes,
time.
by appointment. Yes, by appointment. For
So anybody
research.
who's interested in the history of the arts, specifically here in South Australia, but it can relate to the rest of the country because
Yes.
so many things to it, of course.
Well, exactly.
And also the history of the entertainment industry. It's a shame that I don't think there's a great deal of television information. Did you have much?
Television was sort of on the periphery. Yeah, but it sort of came
It eventually came into the mix.
it, yes.
Because
yeah.
one of the things historically, as you know, we move into the future, if we don't know what the past has been, how can we build a future? There's
That's
no
right.
foundation.
Exactly.
And I get very tired of people saying, oh, you talk about the past, but without the past, we don't have a future. So therefore, what's there is so valuable for anybody researching how did we get to this point in our history
Yes.
of the entertainment industry? And of course,
See, now,
television is part of that too.
here's an example. Helen told me, Helen Trepper runs it now. She's the
Because you
curator.
retired.
Yeah, I retired
And do you
4
still go in
years ago. I do
few
go in
days a
and do
week?
some voluntary work, only once a fortnight.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, only
once
once
a
a fortnight, yes.
Because you know where all
I've
the
sort of got
bodies
one
are
foot
buried.
in and 1 foot out.
Okay.
Yeah. But she said Steve Weiser was in there recently because he was doing some research on Roy Rean for something he's writing. And we've got this wonderful collection that was given to us by Vicky Arnold of her father, Chick Arnold, who was a vaudeville performer.
him
You
too,
remember Chick Arnold?
with the little pencil
A little
moustache.
pencil moustache.
There you go.
Gorgeous man, song and dance man. And
Well,
after
Phil
he
Skinner was
retired,
on
he
the
ran the Majestic.
That's right. Phil
Yes.
Skinner was on the show just recently, and she, of course, worked with Roy Rean. She was talking about, and I believe that when she did her final appearance at Her Majesty's just recently,
At the age of 96.
6 or something. She's
7 this
amazing.
year.
She's extraordinary.
She happened to mention, obviously talking about Roy Rean within the interview, and they talked to her after about talking a bit more about that because she's probably the only one left that ever worked with him.
Absolutely, she is. And see, Vicky's father had some stuff in his collection about Roy Rean, and he'd had a wonderful career.
Shall I just explain? Roy Rean was probably the most famous Australian comedian, along with George Wallace,
Yes.
back in the 30s and 40s. And I'm just trying to think of an equivalent today who would be like the Dave Hughes, I suppose.
Yes.
He was
Yeah,
topical, but he played a Jewish man with a painted-on beard.
Yeah.
Roy
and he
Rean
had
did.
all these wonderful sort of sayings
Yes.
like "cop this young Harry."
Yes, they became part of our Australian
Yes.
vernacular that we've actually lost. And they're the things, and that's why a museum of this type is so important.
Absolutely so important because he who forgets the past is condemned to relive it.
That's absolutely true. I couldn't agree
You
with you
know,
more.
and it's all very well to have all this technology, but you want to have something you can pick up and feel and look at and turn the page rather than just this.
Well, it's also
Yeah.
feel what they felt. That I think to me
Yeah.
that's really important.
Yes.
And sometimes when you see the old costumes or the old props or the little sets that were made for different things, and you look at that and think, yeah, projection's great, or the new LED screens are great in the theatre.
Yeah.
But when you see, oh, I see, it was going to look like, oh, it was all cut out there, you don't get that third dimension thing.
No,
for example.
exactly.
And
And we've got some wonderful costumes
I know.
there. Look,
But-
Dame Judith Anderson gave us. I wrote to her, and back in I think it was the mid-90s, about 93 or sometime, about donating some costumes, and I didn't hear. And then I suddenly got this letter handwritten from her saying, "I've sent thank you so much." She was thrilled. And she said, "Thank you so much. I'm sending the costumes under, airmail to you." Oh, I think it was snail mail, actually, by boat. And they arrived just in a padded bag, these fantastic costumes from Judith Anderson.
Really?
do you think
Gosh.
we should donate our bodies to the
Yes, I think so. Well, we got her ashes.
Oh, really?
Judith Anderson. They sat on my desk for 7 years.
Oh
Good
my
gracious.
goodness.
Yes, Judith Anderson's ashes sat
Good
there.
gracious.
And then they were put in the wall at Festival Centre.
Wow.
At the moment, yeah, because that wall's gone now. I think Helen's put them in storage, and they'll decide what they're going to do with them.
So just currently, the Performing Arts Collection isn't where it was because there isn't anything where it was.
No, it's
so
still
it's a bit,
there.
It's around the place, but
Yes,
you just need to
it's
find
sort
out
of
where it is.
where the old Maggie Day Library used to be, which is above the Playhouse.
And for people who are watching us in the other states, are there performing arts collections in Perth and Victoria?
Yes, there's one in Perth. The biggest one's probably Melbourne.
Right.
They call themselves the National Performing Arts Collection. That's at the Arts Centre there. Queensland has one. I think that's it really. And then universities have got collections too.
I know of people, as we're talking about, Phil Skinner. Phil's given quite a bit of stuff
Yes,
to the
to us,
collection.
yes. Although, see, strangely enough, the people who often do the most work have the fewest items because they're so busy doing things.
They just
They
leave.
don't
They
keep them.
haven't
Yeah.
collected
Yeah.
it, you know.
Yeah.
And Phil had nobody, I suppose, to collect it for her.
No.
No, you just
know,
keep
no
moving,
children.
moving forward.
No,
but
she,
you move
she
forward.
kept some photographs and a few things like that, but no, didn't keep a scrapbook.
No.
You know,
No.
often a lot of these people keep
Well,
scrapbooks
usually it's
or
family
someone
members
else for
that
them.
would do it for
But
you.
interestingly enough,
Yeah.
she did a tour, and we have a digital version of all her life photographs in that,
Thank
and that's
God,
something
she's
I must
so
give
important,
to you. Yeah.
Phil.
She is.
Absolutely.
To
She's
the
so
local
important
community.
to them.
But again, so are you, and we'll talk a bit more with you after this break.
We're here with Jo Peoples. Jo, you've had such a fantastic life. I mean, just amazing, really. How would you like to be remembered, do you think?
Perhaps as someone who was passionate about the arts and who really cared about the arts.
And
I
remembering.
think. Yes.
Yeah.
Why do you think the arts are so important to a society?
Well, they're part of our everyday lives. You know, whatever we do, even at home, even in designs, in furniture, whatever you do, in television, we're surrounded by it
We
the whole
forget that
time.
at times,
We
don't
do,
we?
and the politicians put it right down the bottom of the list because, you know, you don't get votes or football's more important, particularly in South Australia, you know, the art.
Well, I think it's probably very
sports.
important in Victoria too. I think it's.
Yes, you know,
Yeah.
they don't see the value of it. And I think it's really important for kids to get an understanding and an enjoyment
An
from some
appreciation.
form of the arts while they're younger.
Yeah.
You know, because it's fantastic for your memory, for your deportment, for every aspect of your life.
Well, you know, I was recently, big noting, but I was recently in the UK and I went to Hampton Court, and there were school tours constantly going through Hampton Court. And a friend said to me, that's why the English are so proud of their history, because they can see it, because it's there. That's the home of King Henry VIII and several other kings afterwards. But they can see what their historical background is, so they're nurtured into the history.
Yes.
And in a way, this performing arts collection that we're talking about is the history of our industry.
That's
and
right.
a lot of the new people coming up into our industry have no knowledge that there was ever an industry.
No.
So when parents are trying to advise their kids, as we were talking about before, performing is a real profession. Yes, you have to be passionate about it, but if you're going to be the best doctor, lawyer, dentist, whatever you want to be, accountant, you have to be just as passionate to be successful.
And they don't realise there was only professional theatre in South Australia with the establishment of the State Theatre Company in '65. Oh, well, John Edmund in 60.
There was work before that, yeah,
Work
but it was
before that,
yeah,
but it wasn't
transient.
sort of.
Hey, we have to go on that
Yeah.
note. It's been just lovely spending the
Thank
last
you,
half
I've
hour
loved
with
it.
you.
Thank you both. very
Stories I've
much.
never heard before.
Exactly.
And people whose names I'd almost forgotten. And don't forget us. She's Janice.
Yes, and you're Malcolm.
And we'll see you next time. Please keep yourself nice till then.
Bye.